Hello, and thanks for joining me. I'm Nicole Watt, the Pixel Maven at Pixel Maven's Retreat, and this is the Crafter's Toolbox, where we build our crafting skills just a few minutes at a time. So let's go down to the tabletop and see what I have for you today.
So we'll be adding to our toolbox today with a fun technique using stencils and distress oxides and a little bit of shimmer paint. So you'll need a stamp set that has a coordinating stencil or a stencil that you've made from a die that coordinates with your stamp set. This happens to be Sketchy Floral by Altenew. So I have this stamped on some watercolor paper. I used Versat Fine Clair in the Nocturne Black. And then, of course, I've got the Floral Drape stencil from Altenew that fits right over the flowers. So normally you would do this and you could color in the flowers. Well, we're going to actually use a stencil to create the splotchy background like I did here. And you can see that it turns out different every time. So here's a sample of one that's completed. It just needs to be turned into some cards and maybe some detail work done on the flowers. And then these cards, of course, are complete and they look totally different because I used different colors and these were actually part of the same piece. You can see I just cut them down for two smaller cards. So once you have your design stamped and attached to a piece of hardboard, so that way when you're doing all this water work, it doesn't warp, you're ready to go. So pick out some distress oxide colors. It can be any color you want. And there's a few ways you can do this. I'll be using these Teflon sheets to kind of help with the getting the color on here. But what I'm going to do is take my stencil and flip it over so that the back side is facing up. And I'm just going to start with some colors. So I'm using peacock feathers, and I'm just going to get that on there. And then I think I'm just going to add some lucky clover maybe into it in some different places. Now I could also just put the color down on here. That would work too. But so I'm going to start with those two, and then I'm just going to spritz this with some water and turn it over and just let it start to move a little bit. And now that it's moved, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and place it right over my flowers. And I can just press a little bit. And we're going to get that color on here. So this time I did it a little different than I did initially. I've been using the Teflon sheet to create my mixes. This time I just put it on here. So what I'm going to do is spray more on my Teflon sheet and smush him all around. And now I'm going to go over this again. And we know with distress oxides, the color is just going to lay on top of each other. They're not going to really blend. So there we go. There's some more. Now I'm going to take a towel here. And honestly, I kind of prefer getting it onto the Teflon because then I can take my stencil and really move it around. So this is Twisted Citron. And now I'm going to just move my stencil around on here. And again, I'm going to pop that right over. And there we go. Now you can keep doing this as much as you want. You can't really go wrong with anything. The more water you add, of course, the looser the pigment is going to get. So you'll end up with some lighter shades. So there. Let's get this off of here, and we'll add in some wild honey. Kind of a totally different color than all these greens we've been doing, right? So it should pop a little bit. If you want, you can dry it along the way. Just use your heat gun and just get a little bit of this to dry. And that will keep the inks from moving together too much. Not that you're going to end up with anything muddy because we're using the Distress Oxide. There's not going to happen. But it will keep them from blending. So let's try a little bit of wild honey. And of course, with the Distress Oxides, when they get wet and then they dry, there's a little bit of like a white chalkiness to them. That's really kind of cool too. Okay, so this is going to look really awesome because it's such a bright yellow over the rest of this. Is that not neat? Very, very cool. Okay, so the last thing I really want to add to this, background-wise, that is some shimmer. And I was going to use the champagne mist, but for some reason I really feel like copper. So I'm going to use the bright copper instead. And if you need any of these products, of course, they're down in the description. So this I just pour out a drop or two. And really it's the same process. This is a water soluble. So just get a little bit of water on there, and then I just like to move it around a little bit with my finger because it doesn't move as readily as the Distress Inks. But this is going to be money. So now I have this copper on here. Pop this over the top. You can kind of even force it to move in different places if you just use your finger to kind of squish it. All right. Very cool. I might do a second round on that. But this you definitely want to dry in between because you really want the copper to stick. It's not like the Distress Oxides. So you want this to dry up. And the cool thing is you can move it around. You can pick up your board and let it drip if you want. All sorts of things that you can do with these metallics. There we go. And I'm going to put a second coat of the copper on. So here we go. Awesome. And then once you're done, you're just going to go ahead and dry this up and decide how you want to finish using it. You could do a big 5x7 card, or you could cut it like I did in my original designs and turn it into two A2 sized cards. You could frame it, all sorts of things. So in my originals, you can see here that I did some additional watercoloring into the flowers to really make them pop out, but I didn't want to add any more color, so I just used black and washed it out into shades of gray. So that way they were just kind of like black and white flowers with a beautiful colored background. I hope you enjoyed today's technique and that you add it to your crafter's toolbox soon. I hope to see you again for another video, but until next time, happy crafting.